Alright, no shot this video doesn't get disliked to hell. Jokes aside, yes, I did like this show. Yes, I thought this season was good. That being said, I did think this season had some downsides to it in some areas. And yes, those opinions are coming from somebody who is not a hardcore Lord of the Rings fan, purist, or a big reader of Tolkien's books. I think I read the movie version book of Fellowship of the Ring once, but that was about it for me. I've seen the original trilogy twice over. I think it's a fantastic trilogy and one of the best ever. And then I also saw the Hobbit films, and sadly I don't seem to remember anything about those movies, of which are not as good. So as a casual fan, I went into this show not expecting to know anything, but to hope for a good show that I enjoy from this world. After watching the finale the other day, I can say with full confidence that I myself got a good start to this series. Not a perfect one by any means, but I enjoyed it quite a lot. And also, before we begin, as a bit of a disclaimer, because this show has become such a polarizing topic on the internet, I would caution that if you come into this video's comment section and attack either me or anyone else for their opinions, you will be removed. That goes for everyone, no matter what side you are on. If we can all have our agreements and disagreements while communicating it normally, then that's all accepted. But no attacking, name calling, or anything like that will be tolerated. Now, with that out of the way, to talk on the show itself, I overall through this 8-episode journey enjoyed what I saw and experienced. Yes, there are some low moments inside of it that offered slow moments of questioning why things would take so long to transpire, but it also would give us those really high moments of action and world building that gives us some of the most gorgeous looking scenes and sequences ever captured on film. This show cost almost $500 million to make, and I think this is definitely money well spent from that side of things. Each episode offers something of that notion to warrant giving the show the feeling of a spectacle and giving the viewer those moments of epic proportion. The show takes place thousands of years before the original 2 movie trilogies, following younger versions of some established characters while setting in motion many of the events that lead up to those trilogies, with Sauron being revealed to the world and the Orcs taking over Middle-earth. Not every episode has action and something massive in grand scale, but overall I think if I were to grade the season based off a start, it would get a thumbs up for me. I do like many of our characters who are, even at points, sometimes not as well written to start, but in the end showed moments of growth and development. I do feel as though there is a lot of wisdom and good commentary on how we act as people and where our beliefs stand all throughout the show, from how our characters speak and act. The biggest character who exemplifies that for me is Galadriel, arguably the show's lead who gets most of the story from a singular character. At first, the way her emotions carry her, she doesn't leave much to be desired, but at the same time you understand and side with her motivations. Over time as the season goes on, I think she was able to learn from moments that make her come off as wrong in emotional content, but very correct in that what she fears to be true is reality. I will also say the actress who plays her does an exceptional job at amplifying that. When you look at a character like Halbrand, who is primarily the one who follows her on her journey, I think you get a back and forth that offers for development to each their own. I think by the time you get to that season finale for both characters, they both found where they were going to go in their journeys, I feel. And knowing what happens to a character like Halbrand and his journey, I think he was very well executed based on everything they have been leading up to the moment where it was revealed who he was as the character he plays. And I've seen a lot of people say that the actor did a great job, and I couldn't agree more. I think this guy does such a wonderful job at playing who he was throughout these 8 episodes. Also, by the way, that's not to say that I don't want to use any of these actors by name, because at the same time, I don't know who any actor is in this entire show, just for clarification. I've never seen anyone here in any other piece of media before. Which actually, in some cases, kind of plays to one of the show's strengths, in that you really don't have a single actor in this entire show who is of huge recognition. And at the same time, I can understand why for some people that might hurt the show, because it doesn't give them much of a reason to want to watch the show from whoever would play a certain character. But that's neither here nor there. But of course, I'm not going to talk about every character because there are a lot of characters in the show, but in terms of the characters that we do follow along mainly, I will say the 2 I do want to talk about for the most part right now are the characters of Elrond and Duran. Listen, I've seen a lot of different shows and films over the years, starting from this decade and even going back a little bit further before that. When we talk about recent television and or movies for that case, I don't know if I've seen a more well-written friendship than theirs. Now, clearly for me, I might be exaggerating that a little bit to say that it is the best, but I for one do think it is one of the best friendships that I've seen in recent entertainment in a long time. These two have such incredible chemistry with each other to the point where every time they are on screen with each other, you can just immediately tell, even when they are not speaking to each other, that they've known each other for a long time and have been friends for years and years. I think the perfect way that you could possibly write a friendship in a show or movie is that you have to start it out by making people believe that they are friends. The first scene of which they are on screen together as they are about to go into the competition of smashing rocks, you can feel the energy between them in that aspect of friendship. And I think right off the bat, I would say that this is easily maybe the best part of the entire show from a character perspective. I do think we will eventually see them again in Season 2, and I do hope that they continue to be on screen with one another because it is maybe the one thing that brings the show in for a lot of people. Both actors do such an amazing job, and hopefully I can see them in something else that is not this show in the future. And overall, I will say this, I wish I could talk about every character and every storyline, but at the end of the day, there's just so much in this show that would take me almost an hour just to talk about everything. And honestly, that might go to one of my criticisms of the show, but we'll get to that soon. I think taking both of those things into consideration, character and story, overall I think there are a lot of characters that I do like, and at the same time there are also some characters who I didn't like as much and wish I didn't get as much screen time with. When it comes to storylines, I think the one storyline for me that definitely dragged this show for me a lot was the Harfoots, and I think that's something that a lot of people agree on. I think that whole storyline with those characters definitely could have used a little less screen time, but also at the same time some better editing to cut some scenes down a little bit. I think with those characters there's a lot of talking and a lot of scenes that just go on for too long to the point where I understand why everybody says that that's the most boring part of every time they are on screen. And I'm not really going to sit here and deny that I think they were by far the slowest part of the show. The one thing that really did carry it was the story behind the stranger. I actually do think he was interesting, and finding out who he could potentially be in the finale left up for a lot of questions to be asked. Every other storyline for me did have moments of entertainment and enough to really get me interested, but the Harfoots for sure left me a little down. And again, this is coming from somebody who is not a huge fan of this IP. I've said it and I've said it many times before, but the biggest aspect of both trilogies and of this season that I've just not been a fan of at all are the really slow parts that involve a lot of talking. I think something that a show like House of the Dragon, for example, really excels on is that even when there are a lot of scenes of talking, they are filmed very well to the point where you never know what to expect next, and it's always the tension of each scene. Those scenes have a purpose to the story, and I feel like in this show, there are a lot of scenes that have no purpose to the story of characters just talking to each other, and you just really don't care. So I think for me, coming out of this season, my 3 biggest flaws ultimately, or I guess 4 in this case, were that the directing in a lot of scenes throughout the show was a little bit weak. The writing from a perspective of scenes that would drag the show along was not very well done, and then the editing was not up to par with certain storylines in the sense that some of them should have been cut down a little bit to make the scenes feel a little bit more organic and not dragged out. The final criticism I have is that there is just a lot to take in. There are a lot of characters, there are quite a few storylines and plot points, and I think personally this season could have been much better off if it cut down on some of almost everything. But again, this stuff for me was scarcely throughout every episode, and it didn't bother me as much, which is why I only find all these criticisms I have to be minor to very little how major they are. I certainly didn't need every single scene or episode to have some form of action, but I will say, to get into another big positive of mine, the action in this show is incredible. Again, like I said earlier, you can see the money on screen by watching this action. I love how there are a lot of scenes that involve a lot of practicality and wire work that looks just really good from the way it's shot. The violence for me is something that I didn't expect it to be heightened to where it was at, but I really enjoyed it. Oh, and speaking of practicality, it only just dawned on me that if we are talking from a technical side, the best thing that this show did more than anything else was making the orcs look as practical as possible. I mean, come on, man. Look at these images that I am putting on screen. Tell me this is not one of the coolest aspects of a fantasy show that you've ever seen. The orcs in Lord of the Rings have always been very scary and menacing, and I think this show really gave us maybe the most practical look at that part of them. I love every second that an orc was on screen, whether that be the army itself or even a character like Adar, who was a part of the first group of orcs to ever happen. I think this character is a very nicely well done mix of both what came before and came after the process of him becoming an orc. He's also just very well played by the actor who portrays him, and I'm looking forward to potentially seeing him again as well in the second season. But at the end of the day, I think if there was a good way for me to end off this video, it would be to just talk from the casual perspective of a viewer. While I am glad that this season is done because I don't want to see people arguing anymore about it on the internet, I do feel happy that as a casual viewer, I got myself a good season from this IP. Again, I don't think that this show in any way is perfect. It has a lot of flaws that are very noticeable throughout. But at the end of the day, I stuck with the journey and I loved and liked a lot of what I saw. If hopefully next season, whenever we get it, can up everything that I liked and maybe fix on stuff that I didn't like, we are in for a great season of television whenever it may come. Of course, we know that Amazon does not have the rights to everything around Tolkien's books, so they have to be stringent with it. So honestly, I'm probably going to expect to see a lot more arguments and divisiveness online whenever the next season comes. But looking at it now, I think from a casual audience perspective, a lot of that audience did like this season, so they did good on one part of it, even if not everyone from a purist perspective was as on board. But I think for me, that is going to do it for this video and for The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Season 1. I will definitely be here for Season 2 when it eventually comes. I'm going to imagine sometime in 2024, since they did just only start shooting it this past week. I now want to hear all your thoughts about the season down below in the comments, and please, let's not have any arguments with each other that lead to name calling. If you disagree with my opinion on the season, tell me in a respectful way, and if you agree, I'm here to hear it. And also, let's have a conversation, because at the end of the day, I think that can make for a healthy debate and how we feel. I hope everyone here has a great rest of the weekend, and I will see you all in the next one.